Hello, my name's Tonya. I'm a personal trainer and a mum of 5. This is my podcast, Live Yourself Better, and it's for busy people just like you. Hello everyone, and welcome to the podcast all about change. How to make lasting changes and how to make small changes in small steps that form lasting habits. We'll also be talking about why weight loss goals can be restrictive and why focusing on health metrics can produce more effective long-term changes. So stay with me and find out all about how to make those changes in your life that you might have been putting off, that you might have found overwhelming, or you might not realise that you can make in such small steps that you'll barely notice them. A very good friend of mine who lives in the Northwest, who's been with me for much of this journey and has been very candid about her own experiences of dieting and in the fitness industry over the years with trying out various things to various degrees of successes in the long term, actually said something that just really struck a chord with me when we were talking about the Live Yourself Better approach and how I promote the idea of making small changes, but small changes that last and they're not overwhelming. And she said, it reminds me of the story of the hare and the tortoise. And I said, that's absolutely perfect. For anyone who doesn't remember the story, the moral of the story was basically the tortoise won. The hare was much faster, but the tortoise won. And the moral of the story was slow and steady wins the race. And that's absolutely the approach that I take when it comes to lifestyle fitness for the majority of clients. Now, some people might be listening going, I don't want to go slow and steady. I want quick results. I want to see some changes fast. And that's where an individual approach to this is really important, because the discussions that we have in the beginning at the consultation really reveal what's achievable, what's realistic, what your goals are, and how this can last for the long term. And of course, in some cases, it's going to be appropriate to implement more changes to begin with, especially if you can actually make those changes last. So I'm not saying that it has to be a drip process. I'm just saying that what we don't want to do is become overwhelmed, so much so that the very thought, idea and notion of doing anything to do with fitness, nutrition, health, it just becomes a massive chore, and in which case we stop doing it. And I know there are studies out there that show people who've lost weight on diets, after a certain period of time, they've gained that weight and more. And then where's the health benefit in that? It was a short period of time of being at a certain weight and then realistically spending more years at an increased weight from where you started. So in some respects, it's almost as though, wow, I'd have actually been better if I did nothing, potentially. But of course, we don't know that. And that's not what the studies are saying. But there's the temptation to wonder what if. And that's why I just want the focus to be on things that we can keep doing. And now I don't mean you've got to pick one thing and keep sticking at that one thing forever. That's where variety comes in. We evolve and change as life goes on, and sometimes our abilities evolve and change, and sometimes things like we might have an injury, we might have an illness, we might increase our ability to complete something and then want to move on and challenge more. That's a really important part of a program as well. You might find you're pregnant, and then in which case, of course, there needs to be a consideration around that when we're programming for fitness. So it's not just something like you must do this every single day for the rest of your life. But where I'm coming from is if we start small and gain the confidence within ourselves that, yeah, I can do this. And actually, more importantly than that, what I'm now doing makes me feel good and it's impacting positively on all the areas of my life. And actually, health and fitness isn't terrifying and nutrition isn't scary. then it's so much of a better position to be in than just go at everything hammer and tongs, get these rapid results, and then 6 months, 12 months from there, where are we? Are we at that place? Was it sustainable? If yes, then that's fantastic. But if no, then we need to look at why. Something that I've noticed about the clients that come to me, and also women that I've met over the years, is that there's almost an element of trauma, and sometimes there is trauma, I think, that's been caused by previous diets or previous fitness regimes. It's everywhere, it's inherent, that perhaps it's so overwhelming, the thought of going back to something that's really restrictive. And I've often found that someone will say to me, oh, I lost such and such amount of weight when I was doing this, and they can't sustain it, or they remembered counting calories and they remembered becoming obsessed about it, and then it kind of takes over, or they've had a bad experience. It could go back to even being at school in PE or at sports day, that something happened that triggered something there, some kind of self-consciousness. It can be a comment that someone's made, it can be a comment that family members have made, or it can be beliefs that are held by family members about body shape and body size that person has absorbed about themselves, even if they've never been directly said to them. It could be the influence of the media, expectations that we should look a certain way. And all of this, it could be something like someone's been in the gym and had a bad experience, or had someone say something to them when they've been out exercising. It could be a combination of a lot of different things, actually. Much of the time, the fear comes from within us, but that's not to say that it hasn't been triggered by an actual event. That's also true. And so the combination of those two things can just be really overwhelming, and it can prevent people. It's not surprising that someone's thinking, really? It's too much. It's too much to go back into those feelings, those emotions, and to revisit all of that. So actually, I'll just carry on as I am, because it's almost like it's too painful to open that door, because it feels as though you open the door of the cupboard and everything's just going to fall out on top of you. So, well, just keep that door closed for now. And I get that completely. So I do find that there is some work initially to be done with clients, kind of unravelling all of that and all of those long-held beliefs about yourself and what your history is. Not just the exercise history, but what you've been through and what's got you to where you are. And it's so important. And I remember being shocked, really, in the 90s when I found out, probably afterwards, how many of the girls, teenagers my age that I knew, that were struggling with some kind of disordered thinking around eating, maybe even so far as eating disorders in themselves. It was a time when the immediate images were, it was called heroin chic. It's not something I've come up with, but that's what it was referred to as. And we had these supermodels, the waif shape with the thigh gap, which for people who are not old enough to remember that era, it's where you can actually see like almost the part, the way the woman's thigh is parting. There's like a gap there. So where you have a fleshy thigh, that's absent. For some individuals who have that body shape, yes, but it's a small percentage, and it's not something that's achievable in a healthy way by the rest of the population. But yet it was becoming something to kind of aspire to. And in amongst that, as I say, eating disorders came out of that. That's something I can't work with. If someone has an eating disorder, that's something that's out of my scope of practice. And even though I have personal experience, my own experience doesn't qualify me to support someone through that. So I would always refer somebody on. If something like an eating disorder came out of our discussions, I will have to say I can't help with that side of things. But what I can help with, and from my own experience, is understanding some of the damage that's done to us by the diet industry, by media expectations, by societal expectations, and by the pressure we put on ourselves, and by some of these really restrictive regimes, how they can actually break us mentally. They don't serve us well, and especially when it comes down to becoming obsessed about things. Obsessions are never ever good, and so I do some work initially to try and understand where you've come from, where you're at, and what your fears are, and how we can work together to embrace the changes without it becoming something that turns into a nightmare. It's supposed to be enjoyable, and it's supposed to be a workable part of your life. And that's my belief, and that's what I stick to, and that's how I work with you. One way we can begin to move away from the trauma of diets, of body size, of the numbers on a scale is just by setting different goals. And recently I had a conversation with a lady who said to me, I was going to the gym for 6 months, and in that 6 months, to be honest, my weight didn't really change. And I got to the point of thinking, like, what's the point? I'm spending money on the gym. And I said, but what else changed? And it just really made her think, because in the time she was exercising and when we discussed it more, there had been an improvement in her mental health, in her well-being, in her everyday ability to complete tasks without feeling exhausted. When she looked back on it and thought about it in detail, and something else which we don't know because it wasn't taken at the time was, what was the impact on her blood pressure? What was the impact on her resting heart rate? Those kind of metrics. What was her internal body fat percentage? Did it decrease over the time? Because if you're incorporating resistance activity and regularly exercising, you can actually change your metabolism, and you can also change your body composition. But how bizarre to me that the only metric that was given to this lady was her weight. So when she'd signed up to the gym, there may have been others taken, but the one takeaway for her was that my weight on the scales, that number didn't move much in 6 months, so therefore it was a waste of time and money. And I really feel as though that's absolutely not on that lady, but that's on the whole of the fitness industry. And, our culture, to say, what are we doing when we're exercising? Are we just exercising for a number? Do we kind of understand the benefit that we're getting? And does it always have to be all or nothing? Or can we kind of break that down and see the positives within our daily life and the impact that that might have on our long-term health, rather than trying to throw ourselves into routines that we maybe can't keep up or we don't know why we're doing? Okay, so the first thing that I think we need to acknowledge is that change is hard. And if we think about why so many people don't stick to New Year's resolutions or other promises or even diets, I know so many people who will say, oh, I lost weight before and, then what happened? I'll put it all back on. Okay, well, what happened? Well, I stopped doing the things that I was doing when I lost the weight. Okay, well, how come you did that? Well, they were too difficult. I couldn't stick to them. And of course, most times they are. It's absolutely understandable. I think sometimes we try to make changes that are too big, too overwhelming, and we do tend to view things in black or white. There's no shades of grey. So people say, oh, I'll start the diet tomorrow. And, maybe tomorrow does come, but it involves sacrificing so much that even if you do manage to sustain tomorrow, soon it becomes yesterday, because it's not possible to live alongside a really restrictive routine that takes things away from you in life that you enjoy, or makes you obsess over things, or even makes you have to say no to going out to social occasions, or worry about going on holiday, or worry about going to a wedding, panic about going to a restaurant. None of those things are conducive to really having a healthy life, because there's so much worry involved. And the other thing about change is that we are creatures of habit, ultimately. We don't really like change. And I even see it when I hear the statement, well, in order to lose weight, you need to, or be healthy or whatever, you need to just eat less and move more. Eat less and move more. Oh, that's so easy. It's such an easy thing, isn't it? Eat less and move more. I mean, for me, even that, I think, well, I'd just break that down and make it even simpler. So begin with move more. Because if you eat the same amount and don't change anything, but just start by moving, then you change something and it's not as overwhelming. And that's not to say that nutritional adjustments don't need to be made. Normally they do alongside a healthy routine, but sometimes not to the extent that people might think. And that's something that I will discuss more in a later episode of the podcast. But for today, we're going to focus on how do we actually make changes in our life that we can sustain. What's the best way to approach that? And how can we view change as something positive and not as something torturous when it comes to health and fitness? First of all, it might be useful to think about the trans-theoretical model, which basically identifies 5 stages of change. It's also known as the stages of change model. So the first stage is called pre-contemplation. This is a stage where you're not even thinking about changing. You don't even know that you need to change anything. You're just going on as you are. The second stage is contemplation, where you're starting to think about changing, but you're not ready yet. So perhaps that might be an awareness that something needs to change, but not really wanting to start that yet. The third stage, preparation. This is where you're actually actively making a plan to change. Fourth stage is action, where you're actually implementing the plan. You're not going to, you actually are. And then stage 5 is maintenance. So you need to keep up with those changes and prevent yourself from repeating old patterns. And perhaps if you think about your own health and fitness journey, I'm yet to meet somebody who hasn't either attempted some form of health and fitness journey or diet, or I have to say, particularly for women that I meet, everyone's got a story about something they've done. when you're younger, or maybe more recently, or maybe repeatedly, lots and lots of different things. But for example, when it comes to, gym membership, when somebody's maybe pre-contemplation, they're not even thinking about that. And then next of all, it might be that somebody kind of walks past a gym and looks in and thinks, yeah, that's okay, but I've got all my reservations and fears, and maybe it's not for me right now. I'll do it another time. And then the preparation, well, that's when they're on the website or on the phone asking about membership, or a friend has said, come on, if I refer you, we each get the first month free, come along with me. Or someone's invited you to go in for a class or something. You've bought your pair of trainers, or you bought your gym bag or something, or you bought your gym pass, you're going in to try it maybe, or you're planning to try it. You've got a date in the diary. When you take action, that's when you've gone and done it. Maybe you've signed up for your membership and you're right in there and you're going, and maybe you're going regularly. Maybe you've got a plan. You might have a personal trainer, or the gym instructor there has written a plan for you, and things seem to be going well. And then it's the maintenance. So whatever changes you've made and whatever strategy that you've put in place, is that then possible for you to keep doing that, or to keep doing some kind of variation of that? So making it more interesting, making it fun, just adding something a bit different into there to keep you stimulated and to keep you going? Or does it happen that we tend to drop off from what we were doing and it just becomes a distant memory and then we're back in that cycle again? And I think majority of times we're human and life takes over, and once we lose that motivation, I think that the maintenance stage can become one of the hardest. So that's something that I'm also going to address, because I think it's really important for us when we set out to make changes and when we begin to think about making changes, that we don't try and think too big or put too much pressure on ourselves to make those changes all at once. And I'm really careful with clients. It maybe goes against some of the things that I learned as a personal trainer, or at least some of the things that I was assessed on a case study, where you kind of throw everything at a client. And of course, with being assessed, we need to show we can do all of the things. But actually, to be looking for every single gap in their day or in their week or when they're available to do it, and to keep up that level of momentum, that's a big ask. And it's something that I've struggled with, actually, in my own personal life, but also as a trainer. And that's where I came up with the Live Yourself Better approach, from my own experience, both from training, and then both from thinking about how this works practically. I did have a number of clients whilst I was training, and thank you, if you're listening, thank you to all of you, because I learnt so much from those clients. And I learn from my clients every single day now. But the approach that I developed was down to those initial clients and my own experience. So thank you, because I wouldn't be doing this now. And I certainly wouldn't have had it figured out the way that I have. So really, the first thing to consider is, what kind of changes are you looking to make? If a client says to me, I need to lose 3 stone or 1 stone or however many, or kilograms, I'm talking in old money, but I am getting old, so that's fine. I'll say stones. Then, as I was taught on my course by my coach, when I said the same thing, no, you don't, that's not a goal. And that's why I really try to encourage people to think about maybe a fitness goal. Maybe it might be a distance that you want to run. It might be a distance you want to swim. It might be that you want to walk a particular distance without feeling out of breath. It could be that you want to try and lower your blood pressure, or lower your resting heart rate, or your internal body fat, which is measured with bioelectrical impedance. We can't see the fat. We can't see fat anyway, but there's a difference between the internal body fat, which tends to accumulate in places which might make us more at risk, or do make us more at risk of preventable diseases, such as type 2 diabetes. And those things go hand in hand with things like waist circumference, waist to hip ratio. Body mass index, yes, it's okay. I wouldn't use it in and of itself, because it can be misleading. And it's not an absolute. But used in conjunction with other things, then yes. But I still prefer people to have fitness goals, or even, I think blood pressure goals are really, really, really interesting and can be really motivating as well. But again, it depends what you want as a client, and it depends what you respond to. So that's why I will spend some time getting to know you and find that out first of all. And the way that I tend to encourage changes, it's a gradual process. You start small, really don't try to change everything at once. Pick 1, maximum 2 things. And that's going to be for the first couple of weeks, sometimes even the first month, but the first couple of weeks usually. If people aren't ready to make changes, or they feel completely overwhelmed, I might say something like, for 3 nights in a row, I want you to put this pound coin by your bed, or this red Lego brick on your bedside table by your bed. And that's, what are you talking about? Don't make any changes in your life, just this one change. Once you have managed for 3 nights in a row to put this item by your bed, and you haven't forgotten, you've done it for 3 nights, then contact me, and you're ready to make your first change. And people go, what are you talking about? That sounds mad. But actually, when you try it, it does work. And the reason it works is because you've shown yourself that you can change something. Okay, it's for a very short period, right? So 3 days. However, it's a change to your normal routine. And I think it might be James Clear in Atomic Habits, or it may be another book called Changing Habits. And I apologise, I've forgotten who is the author. But I will link it in a blog. What we have to remember is at some stage, and they say this, that cleaning our teeth was not a habit. How long did it take for it to become a habit? You probably do it now, you don't even think about it. But if anyone has children, and we have those kind of battles with the children of, it's time to clean your teeth. No, it's not. Yes, it is. How long does that go on for? It takes quite a while. It doesn't take us as long to develop habits now. But at some point it clicked, didn't it? And it just became a habit. As did having a wash, washing your hands after you go to the toilet, all of those things. Or at least I hope people do that. I'm saying it. I hope you do. If you don't, you can start. It's, perfectly fine to sort of implement that change. So at what point do the changes become habits? And that's the exact same philosophy with anything to do with lifestyle fitness. Because ideally for me, any changes that the clients are making, unless you're preparing for a marathon, right? So you're not going to be running a marathon. You might be an ultra marathon runner though, happily work with you. But usually if someone's doing something like that, it's an event that's not going to happen too often. So they need to prepare for that. But the event that you may be preparing for is the rest of your life, really. So we want things that you can sustain. And if you can sustain them and maintain them, you're less likely to drop them and to then get on that cycle of dieting, not dieting, dieting, not dieting. So that's the theory behind it. So the key question is, how do we make lasting changes in our lives? A few tips I would say from experience is just start small. Don't try and change everything at once. I've seen so often people get so overwhelmed by the idea, as I mentioned earlier, of starting this diet on Monday. And it's almost like, if I thought that I was going to have to wake up tomorrow or in 2 days or 3 days and give up all of the things that I enjoy, spend my day worrying about food and being hungry, not wanting to walk past fast food restaurants or go out for a meal with my friends because I might eat too many calories or something, I really wouldn't want Monday to come either. It is quite horrible. And whilst I appreciate that it's very necessary for some people to be on highly calorie restrictive diets, that there are certain conditions that require people to adhere to very strict diets, and I completely respect that. And I've also have people who really do need to do that for their own psychology. However, many of those things are not in my scope of practice. So the people that I'm encountering as my clients are people who are generally healthy and need to make a few improvements. So this is what I'm referring to. So when I say start small, don't try and reinvent the wheel overnight. Just perhaps, for example, in the first week, you could drink more water. People always say this. Why? I'll go into more detail in an episode about water. It's not just to make you go to the toilet, by the way. It's also to do with your heart and many other functions and systems in your body. Why don't they tell us this? They don't tell us this. How do I know I'm drinking enough water? Look at the colour of your wee. If you don't know what colour your wee should be, go on Google and look at a urine chart and it will tell you. But basically, you don't want your wee to be too dark. If you're getting dark wee throughout the day, you're not drinking enough, drink more. And maybe another change, you could add in 1,000 steps a day, right? 1,000 steps is 10 minutes of walking. So for 1 week, for each day or each weekday that week, you can walk for 10 minutes. These are the kind of changes that I would get clients to begin with implementing. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? No, because it's not. And this ties into set realistic goals. So we set ourselves up for failure by just being completely unrealistic. I don't personally like the fasting diets. It's down to an individual, but it's certainly not something that I would recommend people to do. I'm not a big fan of deprivation, or I will cut out all sugar. But it works for some people, and that's fine. I'm not trying to throw shade at that, but it's just in terms of what is sustainable and what is lasting. And that might be for someone, so please don't be offended if that is you. So for the majority of people, starting with the small, achievable goals, you might have heard of SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound. I don't know however you say the acronym. But with specific, I will also say the S for small. And be patient. Yeah, so change does take time. My personal journey was 8 months, which actually it doesn't sound that long, but bearing in mind during that time I was training to be a personal trainer, so I had increased the amount that I was exercising quite considerably, and I have sustained those changes. So the changes that were made in the course of that's where I'm at now, there or thereabouts. I don't have a fluctuation except for what you would expect within the course of a regular monthly cycle. So small changes over time can get big results, but most importantly, small changes over time are sustainable, and they're not the kind of changes that will have you crying into your pillow and feeling like a failure because you couldn't stick to them, because you will be sticking to them. Thank you for joining me for today's episode on changing habits. If you enjoyed it and would like to see more, then please check out my website, Live Yourself Better, which is Live You Better, LIVEYOU, better.biz, BIZ. On there you can find the links to all the podcast episodes, and also you can click the links to my social media channels. So wherever you are on social media, do come and find me. And the next episode on the 22nd of October will be all about growing old gracefully. How do we age in an essentially ageless society that places so much value on looking young? So stay tuned, stay with me, and I'll see you again next time.